UConn?
From UConn.
You teach at UConn?
Still, I got a little bit left in me in the runway, but I'm exiting quickly. Yeah.
Okay.
So Chris started when did you start podcasting?
Podcast producing?
Yeah.
I don't know. I was fucking around when I was like in 2018, just drunk with my friends, but professionally end of 2020.
Yeah. So he started doing that, like working his way up in the business, and had talked to me. I lived in the East, in Williamsburg, and he was working in the East Village, and so we started building the podcast back then, and just sort of playing around with it.
Well, that's actually one thing that I need to. I don't know if you have UConn students, but one thing we are pretty cognizant of is we want graphic designers, or like with the team, I want people creating like real time content.
Yeah.
So if you
need
anyone
to create
at UConn,
a lot of content.
So if you have anyone at UConn,
I have
that you
a
can
number.
connect us to.
Well, I have a number of ideas how to do that actually. Yeah. So because the USL is probably the most interesting model in American soccer right now.
Yeah, so we're just going right into it.
Go right into it.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
So the USL, the model.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I didn't really know about it. I'd heard about it and had seen it, and I'm a soccer lover. I was an NYCFC
fan.
First year season ticket holder.
Okay.
Coming from Westchester to Bronx, and then realized that like it's 6 miles, but it's 2 hours of your time because they were putting us in the parking lots out to it doesn't matter if you're the best season ticket holder, you got a parking lot like on the Deegan and had to walk because Yankee Stadium wanted to preserve all the parking around them for God knows what, because there's no Yankee game going on. But in the first year they were just not. This was when they just knocked down. And we're still figuring out the area around it.
One. Yep.
Yeah. So, but the USL, I'd heard some of the teams. I knew some of the teams. Obviously, Charleston Battery's been around forever. Richmond Kickers, but didn't know a lot about it. But the model felt when I first saw it a year and 1 month ago.
Yeah.
And started to dig in. It felt like entrepreneurial.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think anyone would agree the U.S. can go to the moon on soccer, from population to the demographic changes that are happening. We always loved soccer here. Every kid always played it, but we never at the highest levels of professional.
So if you had seen one of my early episodes, I went on a rant about my hatred of soccer and making fun of Americans that pretend that they always liked soccer, because most of them didn't know what the Premier League was 30 years ago. So and they're like, oh yeah. And so, but
45 years ago, I was running around on a Queens field wearing gold shirts, and every kid played youth soccer.
And that was every kid. We did not, right? In Rhode Island, nobody played youth soccer.
Right.
So we would make fun of the kids that played youth soccer. We played baseball, and then we played hockey.
Yeah.
And then some kids
wore the white
played
things,
basketball.
the plastic things on your legs, so you could slide on the street hockey.
Not street hockey, real hockey, ice hockey. Okay. So Mitch, welcome to the show. You're and now I believe in the U.S. soccer market now. I just like to pick on people for their stance on that, like not necessarily you, just the pretenders that suddenly know everything
give you the real.
about
I'll
soccer.
give it to you real.
Yeah.
I think you see that right away.
I believe you that you've been playing and there are guys like Tony Rizza from UConn. He played like Tony's. Those guys.
UConn had a program for
a long time.
One of our players played at UConn.
Yeah, and
Andrew
I think we're coming
Taste.
back. I think we're on a significant upswing.
Sarah Whalen Hess, one of our advisor, our player optimization coach, who's a sports psychologist, was a 1999er, one of the World Cup winners, played at UConn as well.
Awesome.
It's a big Long Island. It was a big Long Island place. If you were a great soccer player in Long Island, UConn was one of the destinations.
Do you know Jigsy?
Oh, not Jiggs McDonald from the Islanders.
No. Jigsy, I call him Rip Hamilton. Jigsy, Rip Hamilton's roommate. Oh. So he was a UConn soccer player in that late 90s.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I call him. So
I did work for the Celtics, so Travis Knight, and I knew his roommate was this guy Kyle Chapman. Right. So I know some UConn basketball players.
Right. Well, yeah. So Jigsy played soccer at UConn, and he was
but
from
he was
Long
Rick
Island.
Hamilton's.
He's from Long Island, but he was Rip Hamilton's roommate.
Right.
And I actually have it in my notebook to call him. Like you had your notebook. Like he's on my list of important people to call as I get into soccer, right?
Okay.
And so that's how Mitch and I met that's how we met is you have an investor that's partnering with me on a different project. And I actually called him up and I was like, hey, do you want to buy a Saudi soccer team with us? And he's like, I'm definitely interested, but you got to talk to Mitch. And then he said, well, Mitch has got some stories, so you should have that meeting on camera. So that's how we do it. So the show, the concept at some level is to get to where deals are done in the open.
Okay.
And be like, and this deal doesn't have to be done on the open, but those things, those intro points.
I'm glad there's a deal to be had. I thought I was just coming to chat.
There's spots, right?
Yeah, sure. No, there is.
So we're definitely interested in spots and looking at it. And but so soccer has been an anomaly for me. Like, I just don't understand it.
Yeah.
Whenever you try to win, they blow the whistle and give you a penalty, and then they let the guys roll around on the ground like. I
don't love that part either.
Yeah,
that's not as much American soccer, by the way.
Really?
That is, having spent some time in Brazil, that is a little bit more of a function of like what they call the beautiful game, which is interesting. But I do think the flop is more like the very skilled players. Even historically in the United States, like when I played as a youth, if there was a kid on the other team that had incredible skill, sometimes his skill was so good that you would just foul him by accident. And it wasn't like you were trying to hurt him. And he wanted to make sure the ref knew that like these guys might be after me. So the first time you foul him, he rolls around in the ground 10 times. And I think, you could tell the kids who played who grew up playing really with their parents at like an elite level, because at like 9 or 10, they were the ones that when they got fouled would definitely
roll around.
Yeah, like they were trying to put out a fire.
Yeah.
They'd stop, drop, and roll.
So in hockey, we took care of that.
You can take care of that a little better. Although soccer's very physical.
Yeah. That's what they say. I mean,
the flopping wise, but
it doesn't look it to me. But I don't know much.
I mean, in the trenches, like when you look at corner kicks and first of all, it is a very physical game that they've cleaned up a lot. Like concussions were definitely a thing when I was growing up. And certain areas, like if you grew up in, like I started playing in Queens before I moved to Long Island, and I think a lot of kids who grew up in those teams and ended up playing on elite teams grew up very physical. You're playing against older kids. There's a mix. If you're good, you're playing a few years up. And so you develop that kind of physical mentality. Unlike hockey, it's obviously it's not as much encouraged. But if you look at soccer and in slow motion, you can see it more. There's a lot of physical shoulder, arm contact. Obviously, if you're spiking someone in the ankle, they're going to go flying and they're going to cry, and they do.
It would hurt.
It hurts.
It hurts
a lot.
in baseball.
It hurts for a second.
Yeah.
And then they probably make it. But they're doing that so that it doesn't happen again.
Okay, so that's
more than anything.
So in hockey, what we have are enforcers.
Of course, Bob Probert. I just saw the documentary.
You go after a star, like someone's going to knock your head off,
and that can happen a little bit in soccer. But if you look at guys like Neymar, I mean, he does flop, but he also takes a pretty good spiking and beating, and players, they're looking when the ball's going up, and you can give a little action under the.
So you have an interesting career before soccer. Soccer is a new career for you.
Yeah, it is.
In like the private equity, the investing, moving into cannabis at an early point, like
very early.
Yeah, like. What was guiding you on those earliest days, not in cannabis, but your career? Like, what were you thinking about?
I mean, what's this?
Yeah, what was the story arc there? What were you chasing? Like, because you're getting into early things.
Yeah. I've always had a little bit of a tolerance for being uncomfortable, which is I tell my kids.
Is that from being raised in Queens?
It could be. Yeah, being raised.
He's in Queens.
I am in Queens, down in Merida, Maspeth.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I was born in Booth Memorial Hospital, which was it was in the shadow of Shea Stadium. So Mets and Jets and all the teams that torture my kids.
Yeah,
it's just
all of them. All of them.
Mets, Jets, Knicks, and Islanders. So 83, I think, is the last. What was the Islanders' last Stanley Cup? Whatever that was.
It was 83.
That is the last
time. They lost to Edmonton.
Yeah, and then that. Dynasty.
And then Edmonton Dynasty.
But so I grew up in Queens, and
Denny Potvin was the greatest.
We had some enforcers on that team.
Yeah, they were great
before
players.
the Mick Vakotas of the world. But I'm a big hockey fan, so
good.
I think hockey might be the second best, other than soccer. I think hockey is the second best sport to see in like something in person versus TV. Like TV to me, football, it's usually played when it's very cold. You freeze. Now I love going to like an NFL game or two.
Do you like women's soccer?
At some levels, yes, a lot. Actually, at the highest levels, it's amazing. What they're doing now is amazing. I think I would prefer to watch the speed, but it's a different game, just like women's basketball is.
Right.
So it has its own virtues. But yes, I just love soccer. I could watch soccer if I'm walking by a field, and so the first
see some kids playing.
Exactly. Like the first game, I I acquired an academy from day one, which is a rare model for the U.S. But I'll get through the entrepreneurial thread. I'll get back there.
All right.
But I've always been very entrepreneurial, and when I want to acquire an academy because field space is an issue, access to fans, and I just thought it would make life easier.
I agree with your thesis,
because the person that I connected with
immediately,
right. Simon Baines is our technical director and has an eye for talent. And the first game I went to watch, he was coaching like maybe 11-year-old girls. And I was really, I watched and I'm like, you could sense right away that the way he coached them and was the way you would coach anyone. But watching their joy and the giggles, and I just love that. And I was like, he would be a great person to partner with. And this an academy is something I wanted to, like, I love watching. I coached my kids when they played soccer early. And I love that. I love that connection to community. And I do love I love watching kids age up and grow and level up. And so his teaching, I knew he would be a great partner, and he has absolutely built the team. I've built the corporate side. He's really built the sporting side. We choose things together like a coach and staff. But for the most part, I've delegated that to him because I trusted him from what I saw in him coaching girls and the boys, and then I went to like the 15-year-old boys where you almost get like a professional approach, much more intense, much different tone, same teaching. Right. And that to me was like, this is someone I could really trust and be like a partner with.
And has that been part of is that developmental strategy been part of your career? Like looking at different opportunities and saying, how do I get in and develop this? Or or were you early on as an investor more opportunistic?
Well, I didn't grow up with a lot of money. So being an investor early on was not a thing that I could do. And I had to do things to get into them. But when I was in law school, I had played around with some programs like Lotus 1, 2, 3. And my brother was a trader, an early SOS bandit. Mm-hmm. And which is in trading world is like the guys who could use institutional quality stuff, but be individuals. And so just watching that in law school, and I had built some businesses. We had always been entrepreneurial, but I built some businesses in law school. One was like a laundry delivery service that I wanted to serve when I was in law school at BU, I wanted all the BU kids to be able to like drop their laundry in one place. And I figured out if you could do an arbitrage between like the laundromats that charge like 80 cents for wash and fold, if I could pick it up and get 60 cents, then I could charge 80 cents, but they didn't have to bring it. And it got off the ground pretty well, but I think schools aren't tolerant to you running businesses on their campuses and using.
Yeah, they're pretty miserable
they shut that down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
They know then they offered it themselves.
Yeah. So universities are not.
So I learned also the power of institutional, how it could just shut you down. But that's part of learning. Like failure is the prerequisite of success. And so some of the things I learned in those, like the early trading days, is electronic trading was something that the speed, the velocity. What I try to do is I try to focus on central themes. And when I see something that has a central theme that I think is authentic to me, but is maybe less understood, it starts to get exciting. Like I said, that comfort with uncomfortability is something, it hits me the same as it hits other people, and I'm okay with the imposter syndrome and all those things hit. And when they hit, I just didn't know how to deal with it as a kid, so I just plowed ahead. And like that has definitely helped me get into some really interesting situations. Like I was one of the early people on the ad tech revolution too. I was working at Market Access, which is a big financial firm, and we were revolutionizing the way bonds were traded online and stuff. And that was a great place to be. That was after my electronic trade. I ended up at the premier electronic brokerage for all these things. But I thought there was more I could do, and I had a young child at home, but I still wanted to feed the creative side. So I was helping startup technology companies write their patents and stuff in Soho. I would walk to Soho after work and for 2 or 3 hours immerse myself in a music startup that was working on something, an ad tech startup, and one of those ended up becoming pretty big. So I've always been open to those challenging things as long as the themes are something I care about. Mm-hmm. Like if it's true to me, then I'm willing to go through whatever it takes, whatever the learning process, whatever that gauntlet is. And really plow ahead.
So I fully relate to that, right? Like name, image, and likeness.
That's how I got into this.
Yeah,
that's what led me to soccer.
Yeah, I got two.
I wanted to do something big on there.
Yeah, so ironically, I'm looking for a USL team that will let me do something big in there.
I'm open to it.
So I've got a couple national championship rings. We built out the infrastructure at UConn under us. There was zero. I always laugh because most of this stuff.
And it just happens you're only an hour north of us, or an hour and 30 minutes if you get the right.
Yeah, well, I just live in the ether, so I'm I need to be a season ticket holder soon enough.
Yeah, well, let me tell you actually the NAL thing, because this is really interesting. So talking about being open, so in the cannabis industry, I had a best friend who right around that market access time in like the 2005 vintage, I'm watching this company explode from a data stuff I understood too. And I'm also like a big intellectual curiosity is probably well above the average. And I'm a reader.
I can tell.
And I'm a big reader.
I would have guessed.
Yeah, I'm a big reader, a history major.
That's why Chris has not said a word. He's afraid that he doesn't talk.
He actually looks like one of the tech guys at one of my original trading shops.
He doesn't talk to smart people. He like only talks.
I listen.
So his love language is clearly is sarcasm. I'm just letting you know that in case you guys ever need couples therapy.
It goes both ways.
Yeah. I'm just letting you know, like literally the sarcasm. But
I lost my phone yesterday. It was on the bottom of the bag over there, and like
he's hiding it from you.
No.
Yeah, I just wanted to keep him here for longer. I haven't seen enough of him.
So
we only did 3 podcasts.
So I was helping people on the cannabis. One of my best friend had been hit by a car and was paralyzed and wanted to look into other medical things aside from opioids to treat his.
That was a really good idea.
And so he went to Colorado, moved there, but you had to have residency to own anything. So I had started helping him, and he actually figured out a model where you could own a building and like rent it out, have like a WeWork of cannabis, because no one had capital there, and they had changed the rules so that if you owned a dispensary, you also had to grow your own, 70% of your own. So rule changes and any type of governmental, I worked on a governmental campaign when I was at law school.
So this is why Patrick wanted you to come on, man. He's like, you got to talk about all this stuff, because this is what we're doing.
But we can keep it as a theme. But it relates to soccer. I think that's why people can have confidence we're going to build something special, because we do have it's not just me. There's a lot of people like me.
I get for me, most of the future of private capital is going to have an important thematic place with sports and entertainment.
It's become the new wealth kind of like, it's like the discounted cash flow like analysis. Like I understand the NFL teams, it's a much different thing. You expect to make like 5 to 10%, whereas at the USL level, you can probably make multiples because it's ground floor.
I'm with you.
Yeah. So,
I mean, I've done a little bit of homework here.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Because like the MLS,
we're going to see in a second.
I don't think you can make money in the MLS. Like if
you're buying you can make money as it's like a 0 coupon bond.
That's right.
Right. You can buy it, and 8 years from now you'll sell it. And if you're like a minority investor, you're probably not getting cash flows, but the team itself is probably okay.
Yeah.
Right. But that is a real estate play in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
it's become and the USL will get that smaller stadium.
So is the New York Mets. So is
true.
Almost every major.
But I think the Mets
developed
because of Madoff. As a Mets fan, Madoff created a situation where there was probably a discount to the brand. And Steve Cohen can elevate that because he has enough money to whatever pops up, he's going to address. And I'm happy to be a Met fan. I'm proud to be a Met fan now. But it was dark during the Madoff mess. Like, Meet the Mess is the cover of the New York Post. The New York Post has a way of really crystallizing what the average human, what the common man on the street thinks. But so I want to go through the stream because you'll see how it leads to soccer and NALs, because it's another area that I went crazy off the deep end just researching. So it's 2009 now. I'm the general counsel of a pretty big financial firm, and the laws are changing, and they say kind of like before the Cole memo, which everyone thinks created the cannabis industry, was really this thing called the Ogden memo, which said something like medical patients have nothing to fear. If you're a medical patient and you have a medical card under your state law, you are free to do whatever you want as long as there's a state law that
allows
you're under the penumbra of a state law. So what happened in Colorado is you had 6,000 patients. It went to like 100,000 overnight. Now, I'm not saying what people were getting it for. Hey, that's not me.
Yeah, but there were legitimate patients within that population,
right,
without a doubt.
So, and I believed very deeply on alternative medicines, holistic medicine, homeopathic.
Food is medicine?
What?
Is food medicine?
Food is not just medicine. We are what we eat.
Okay.
And we can talk about seed oils. I'm a very anti-seed oil. Like, I try to shop seed oil free. You have to read coupons very hard. And in fact, my son has been pressing me. Once I told him, once we get through this and get this up and running in the way that we're comfortable, that it's really, we would love to create a food brand that's like adjacent, like what Jason Karp's done is truly tremendous. Where he created like healthy snacks that have chocolate in
Hot
them,
dogs.
but don't use. No, Hue is the.
No, that's my idea.
Oh, hot dogs. Well, I don't know if you can do that, but I know you can create. You know what? I know there's
I
brands
think
like
you can do it.
I know there are brands that don't use seed oils and use avocado oil or olive oil. It might cost a little more, but people are willing to buy that because seed oils are literally destroying your DNA from the inside out. But so I'm cannabis. I'm just gonna, because I want to just blow through that quick because you'll see how it all threads together. Is I'm out there and the laws are changing now. There's patients in Colorado and there's a business there, and then all of a sudden Connecticut. In 2012, my friends are telling me that they got a letter from the government. They're 975 feet or 980 feet from a school. And under the DARE Ronald Reagan laws, anything within 1,000 feet, the government said, we're not going to get in your kitchen, but if you're within 1,000 feet of a school, we're going to shut you down. So they get that letter and they're like, we're going to buy a building in a different part of Colorado, in a bit different part of Denver now. And I'm like, the model you had was amazing, but real estate in Denver's now
Off
through the
charts.
roof.
Yeah.
No chance. And Connecticut announces that they're going to give out 4 licenses by law, like a sort of oligopoly, but they want medically focused people. So I knew that we had talked to enough people, and there was these early partners that we had that were like, we know all the people that are making decisions, and we're going to win. And I'm like, yeah. Have you ever? Any of you guys ever written a 10Q? Okay. So everyone's all like, we're going to tell them how we grow and how we have the best grow in Colorado and the best consultants. I'm like, I'm writing a 10Q.
Mm-hmm.
So we were partners with you guys, and then we were like, we're going to do our own thing. You guys are like cannabis guys. We're going to show compliance. And so I wrote a 2,000-page application with a few other people and my partners in Colorado that laid out how safe and how it was that arbitrage of information, which I've always been completely magnetized to in my life. Like my North and South Pole are like ethos, honesty, integrity, and then intellectual curiosity. Like those are the things. And then where it takes you, you have to decide on an individual basis if all
So
things.
now I know why you're friends with Patrick.
Yeah, no, I met him, I met him when winding down a massive. I was the last employee of a big financial firm that I pulled apart piece by piece and actually preserved like millions of dollars of value, because once you get in the deals, it all comes down to, are you willing to read every document, understand everything at a molecular level, and then can you take advantage of that to preserve value? So I actually ended up writing an internationally published legal article about what general counsel should do when a company's failing. And it got pretty good traction. Like I got a lot of reach outs on like LinkedIn from it and stuff. And I just wrote it because it was just authentic to the experience that I had. But that leads me to, I win this licensing in Connecticut. I score. They give a score sheet out in public, and we're the highest team by a mile. Like 2 standard deviations above everyone else in scoring. And everyone's like, oh, they must have cheated. They must have known. And it's like, no, we wrote a regulatory compliance document. You wrote how good you grow weed.
Yeah.
And so within weeks, we were getting emails from every other state that was looking to change their laws. And we ended up winning one of the 2 licenses in Minnesota thereafter with a prominent family that ran a nursery. Now they ran a nursery. They knew nothing about cannabis, but they had like some good business people there. And you go to Minneapolis and you're working there for like 2 months. It's really cold.
Yeah, I'll be there the 23rd and 24th.
A lot going on. They were building US Bank Stadium at the time.
Okay.
This is like 2014, 15. And an indoor football stadium made a lot of sense in downtown. It's great. And we're in a hotel room, and in a law firm just writing this 1,500 page application, whatever it is. And then you wake up, and in the medical cannabis world, you're like pushing, you don't mean to, but you're now pushing the needle. And I ended up building a fund because every person I knew was sending me decks for cannabis companies. And it was so overwhelming that I couldn't do the job I was doing. So I almost had to create a fund because I was seeing deal flow that no one on Wall Street was seeing.
Right.
And so I created a fund, and then that, 8 years later, we got really big, but still to this day has about 300 million under management, Merida Capital. And I still love and believe in a lot of the things we've done. We own a lot of medical data for reimbursement decisions. So if rescheduling happens, we're very well positioned. But through that, in the last couple of years, as cannabis became more normal and more of like just a real business and more commercial, there's obviously hiccups that you don't get in other places. There's still regulatory
credit cards,
arbitrage.
et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, that's worked out largely, though. That's a little bit mythology, but it still happens. But you
go downstairs and try to buy with a credit card.
Right. Well, you have to use a debit card. That's true. But
I want my Amex points.
Okay, there is one downstairs. I noticed on the way in.
Yeah.
That was kind of interesting. Okay, well, you could, if you smoke enough, I guess you could probably fly for free everywhere.
Yeah.
So I realized that's a big hindrance. So I wake up one day, a couple of years ago, and I'm hearing about a Supreme Court case that might, the Ed O'Bannon. First, it started like this years ago. Ed O'Bannon, and my son would complain that there's no NCAA college basketball game because of the brewing fight over UCLA, Ed O'Bannon. Yeah. And he really deserves a lot of credit for pushing it.
For sure. He should.
He advocated for himself, and a lot of college kids.
And most won't.
And they don't even don't hear his name, but he is the guy that really pushed his head.
Fully aware.
And so my son's like, oh, college basketball's coming back because an NIL thing is happening. And I'm like, NIL, what does that even mean? Oh, name, image, likeness. And then there's a court case. So we're looking, I'm like thinking maybe I could build a database. I went to Brandeis, I played tennis there. And I'm like, maybe I can do something where a consultancy where I help Division III, Division II, and lower Division I teams optimize their NIL concept. Like, why wouldn't a Division III team want to win Division III basketball championship every year? That costs $20,000 probably of NILs.
For sure.
So I thought about maybe I'll do this. And I went to the Brandeis computer science department and was like, the amount of computing power to optimize this would have been off the charts. And I'm like, okay, that's a little too much work.
Trying to find, I've got a student question for you.
Oh, okay.
All right. Before we get off the marijuana.
We call it cannabis, but.
Cannabis.
Yeah.
Hi, Mitch. Big fan here. I'm wondering, how do you see the cannabis industry within the next 10 years from a worker's point of view?
From an employee point of view.
Employee point of view.
Okay.
Because, everything that's happening now, she's a cannabis.
That was real time, by the way. The connectedness of technology is just mind-boggling.
She is a cannabis cultivation minor.
And I'm opening a dispensary. Well, my fund is opening a dispensary in New Haven next week.
Excellent.
So, near Yale though.
All right.
So
they need weed too.
Yeah, no.
They need cannabis
They need it
too.
even more. I mean, the professors there are going to be, they're big buyers, supposedly. But, you have the tweed coat and the pipe. But
and then, for sure.
So the way I see the cannabis is rescheduling is going to happen. And you're going to have a normalized medical vertical that has everything so that's the beginning from medical marijuana to what we call cannabis-based medicines. So the plant itself is kind of amazing. It has so many molecules and terpenes and adaptogens and circogens and all these things that you can use that we've been using in other medicines for years. And so if you think of Advil, it took Advil about 60 years to go from propionic acid to an actual red pill that you could take that actually helps with headaches by, using the chemical channels that someone figured out. But the first person who figured that out was like 1900. And Upjohn released it in 1976. So it's 76 years for an acid they knew was safe, they knew didn't kill you, and they knew for some reason would help with headaches. Yeah. Something, it probably, because it works on the dura of your brain, whatever. It smooths out the where you get tension in your head. And so that's 70 years. So cannabis wasn't really studied till 1993 or 4. Raphael Meshulam, who was a Israeli researcher.
My mother claims she studied it a great deal.
Well, people studied it from usage, but studied the endocannabinoid system. And
I'm with you. I'm 100% with you.
I know when you're laughing. I told you, it's your love language. I can tell you're enjoying the conversation by how much sarcasm you inject.
Yeah, there you go.
So I think
that's all I got in this one.
This is the most I've ever heard him shut up.
Yeah, we're just listening.
Well,
it's interesting. No, we're interested.
So you're a student. Has
this
question.
Is good.
So what she's asking, so when you get this research, the system in our body that most reacts to cannabis, the endocannabinoid system, which was named because of its mixture with cannabinoids, right? These receptor systems, which have serotonin, pain receptors. I mean, you're talking about a deep receptor system. One thing they discovered right away is you could smoke as much as you want and you don't develop one receptor. But if you take opioids one time, your body starts developing new receptor systems.
I've always felt very, very lucky that I'm allergic to opioids. Like we'll break out in hives.
I've never taken one, so I couldn't tell you.
Well, I got my teeth.
Painkiller.
I got my teeth pulled.
Yeah, me
too. Give them to you.
Actually, dentists. You know what? A study from Tufts Dental, which is one of the top dental schools, showed that a lot of the early opioid addictive cases were people that got mouth pain would get 30 days for what should have been a 2-day, and you start to feel it because those receptor systems look for that interconnectivity, and that's one of the problems with opioids. Whereas cannabis-based medicines, you don't develop excess receptors, so you don't have to take more and more and more. You don't have to ladder it, which is amazing, but also affects your serotonin, which is good because cannabis it doesn't block serotonin. Now, obviously, if you overuse it and there's abuse for everything. You could abuse apple seeds, right? So, but anyway, this doctor study. So 1995 comes around. They now understand what receptor system you have and what natural-based chemicals react with it.
Okay.
And it just so happens that cannabis is the thing that provides the most cannabinoids, right? So that's 30 years ago. That's not a long time for us to understand biological systems. In fact, if you think of it, because of all the non-official usage, we probably understand cannabis better than almost any, like I said, 70 years for one acid that was actually really discovered in the 1850s. So that's Advil. When you look at like zolpidem titrate, which is Ambien, they're still not 100% sure how it affects you. It affects everyone differently. That's why some people get on the phone and maybe make calls that they don't even remember taking. Yeah. So I, or drive
Ambien
down.
is definitely like I
don't know.
There was a point where they just started giving everybody pills.
Yeah.
Like in the early,
I think we're getting off that a little
2000s.
bit. I think we're getting off that a little bit.
But we need to because they were just
I
giving
think
them
the cannabis industry's legality is helping that
without
in
a
a
doubt.
tremendous way. If you look at California.
My dad's sleeping. My dad's
Sleep,
sleeping and
pain.
at night.
Yeah.
Like that's an impossible thing. Usually
I can send
he's
you.
roaming around.
I have a very.
So he says to me, I don't get high. He says, I just eat some graham crackers and go to sleep. And I'm like,
but that's another thing. Cancer patients, appetite. You can save your life.
By
300
eating.
calories a day of extra consumption can actually give you the nutrients you need to survive chemo.
Parkinson's, like
well, those are anything that has a
you
central
gotta
nervous
eat
system
food.
reactivity, the parasympathetic nervous system, even really the sympathetic nervous system. Cannabis, it needs to be studied more. But to your student's question, that's what's really going to change the most is the medical side. I think from the recreational consumption, because if you think about methyl and other alcohols you take as a delivery system, you drink alcohol. Let's say you drink whiskey. There is medical alcohol that helps deliver, like when you get an IV, there's alcohol in there that helps deliver to your bloodstream, like, that little pinch you get before, like when you get Twilight, right before you go to sleep. Propanol is essentially alcohol, right? So when you think of medical alcohol versus recreational alcohol, no one ever breaks it down like that. But cannabis has a special designation, and I think as that I used to use this phrase normalization before legalization to try to introduce the concept of it's already normalized. Nothing has ever been illegal at this scale of usage in the history of humankind. And because of that, when it becomes legal, the levels of its of the pervasiveness of its use and its potential medical use and other things is going to kind of be unrivaled. And that was always the thesis that drove my investment thesis into cannabis and the things I did. And so to this day, whatever challenges the industry has, and it's been pretty epic from a regulatory to banking. And I think some of that is a little institutionally driven to put as much pressure on as possible so that when it gets legal, they can all just swoop in and just scoop it up. Yeah, sort of like housing and right. Some of these crises are manufactured, not necessarily government manufactured. It can just be manufactured through affectations of certain companies or people, or like if you're a bank, what's the point of what's the upside for you? The cannabis accounts. Okay, I have some cannabis accounts, but this institutional investor isn't necessarily happy with that. So I can shut down all the cannabis accounts, which has happened to me in several banks. It's happened over time. And you wonder why that's happening because it's at this point, it's state sanctioned in every way, shape, and form. Like I've never done a thing in illegal cannabis in this industry. And so how am I more of a threat than someone who's selling whiskey?
You're not.
So that's the way we look at it. But so
firearms.
I think, look, there's a dividing line on all these. So I think the industry is going to change the most on research and development around medicine. I think the recreational side is pretty well developed.
Yeah. I agree. It's going to expand and scale.
So I believe in cultivation. You'll have medical botanical grows that are for medicine. You'll have where it's really going to grow, I think, is the segregation of cannabinoids and molecular and atomic features of the plant, where you get down to like cannabis-based medicines that are so hyper-targeted that maybe it's for it could be for PTSD, it could be for pain, and you'll get to different and insurance companies will say, oh, so that we can avoid abuse, here's what you should do. If you have pain and you're like workers' comp, instead of taking opioids and being out of work for the next 6 months, you're going to take a CBD during the day, and then whatever you do at night is your business if you need something with helper. But the CBD, like more molecule-based medicines. And that's why I think it's going to change employment, because I think there's going to be a massive research vertical Like this will be the new space race for human health because it's the next big thing.
So Matt Melander, he built Levia, which was yeah, and so he would agree. Like that's where I first started hearing that thesis was from him, and so he's always been of the opinion like, hey, this really blows up when we can walk into Whole Foods and buy THC-based wellness.
Yeah, sure.
It becomes part of your wellness routine.
It's just part of your regime.
So I got one question that's silly that I have to ask before we talk a little bit more about soccer.
Okay.
Like, how do you spell your name? Because I screwed it up.
It's Bernard Baruch.
All right.
And then Owitz.
Owitz.
See, when you break it down that way, it's like, I think people see all the letters and they just kind of melt.
So,
because I've heard everything from Barchowski to, I mean, you can't even imagine what I've heard. So thank God my first name's Mitch. It's easy. But
Mitch is easy.
My sister's name is Evie.
Right.
But we
got that right in the email.
You did. You added some letters that, look, it's good. My kids learned, B and Z. Like they almost knew the whole alphabet right out of the gate.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's
we had
I very phonetically strong kids.
So you have this interesting entrepreneurial career.
So I look at NAL. I'm looking at NAL. So I'm diving in and I'm like, I need to figure out. So I want to go. I want to reach out to the lawyer who won the Supreme Court case, and then my son reads an article about this guy writing that why isn't Harvard like buying the Ivy League championship every year? St. Peter's in that run a few years ago made more money. It like covered their basketball team for like 15 years.
It makes absolutely no sense,
right? So he wrote this, and we just reached out to him, and we were on LinkedIn, and I was like, I'm sure people reach out to you all the time. He has a pretty good media presence. His name's Andrew Pekash, and the next thing I know, after like a couple conversations, we were like, this guy's he's younger, but he's all about NALs. He understands it.
Does he understand the business side?
Yes. So we started a fund, and we started getting soccer decks. And so I was more of like the behind the scenes advisor, helping him with structure. Like, how do you build a fund? I mean, I just done 4 funds with Merida in a 6-year period. So pretty good. I'm a lawyer. I understand SEC stuff. And I had interest in myself, and I wanted to pursue certain things in the NAL world. And we're looking at tech and data and all these things. And then we're getting all these soccer decks. And so I'm like, kind of figuring out, like, could I bring I thought mine would be something. Westchester needs professional sports. It's one of the rare combinations of population density, wealth, and a lot of blue collar, middle class. Like Westchester's a kind of unique place. Westchester, northern New Jersey, because you don't usually get population density and wealth. Like that's the right population density. Like if you look at cities, the wealth is, the ivory tower. So Westchester has this unique combination. The demographics of Westchester are wonderful for soccer. I'm looking at the demographics of northern New Jersey, lower Fairfield County, and then I start to dig in, and there's 4,000 to 5,000 kids within a 30-mile radius paying $4,000 each to play elite soccer. So you look at the numbers.
We're all over this as well.
Yeah, you look at the numbers and you're like, okay, elite soccer. So this is your consumer base. Your first consumer base is the kid playing and his parents, because those parents are dedicating a lot of their life to watching their kid. But what if they could watch with their kid and have those great conversations like, oh, did you see what happened? And, you naturally become so invested in it that I thought that's your natural fan. So the first thing I thought is, what if maybe I'll look at the academy world. And there's 2 really good academies that were already in Westchester that were big and have like a good financial model. And so I was like, but there's this stadium that was just recently built, a municipal stadium that Westchester built. They redid the Mount Vernon Stadium. There's no other venue, so there's nothing that can go around. It's not like some stadium's just going to pop up in Stamford, Connecticut. There's no room. They're building houses on every plot of land.
Apparently they're popping one up in Bridgeport.
Well, there is some land in Bridgeport, but we'll see what happens there. I think that's going to be harder. I tried to do some work in Bridgeport. I
tried to, yeah. So it's
and
tough
USL, by the way, he was blocked. From what I heard is he wanted to go USL. He was all about the USL, but there's already a Hartford team, and that would have been that would have been a tough, because you don't have a stadium. It's like a 7-year. There's the academies that play there are already kind of affiliated with other things. Like that's going to be interesting. I like wish everyone in soccer good luck, because I feel like a rising tide.
Well, there's going to be there's a rising tide, but there's also such segmentation in this market that there's a real opportunity with the right model.
Lower Fairfield to me feels more like a part of Westchester than it does Bridgeport. Like they don't look to Bridgeport as like their municipal. If those people going to the city still, they're doing everything. They're not going north. They're going south. Everyone from Westport down go south, even Fairfield now at this point. Like the train, that's why you build a second train station. You're not building it so people can go north. You're building it so they can get to the city easier. You know, Fairfield now has 2 train stations. And so one of them is beautiful. And so anyway, I started looking at the demographics, and there's a stadium, and then serendipity, like, you know, I didn't know, you know, a week ago we didn't know each other.
Right. Which there's massive serendipity.
There is, and following.
I've shut up and let you talk because I'm just trying to I'm mapping out in my mind the seven opportunities that we're working on. That we're working on separately but equally.
I see he's taking a lot of notes. I'm a little scared here.
He's probably.
I'm storing you, dude. I'm trying to make you guys famous. Everybody has their role here.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So definitely at Westchester SC though, if you're going to do anything with me. Yeah. Oh, we should put the scarf on. We should hang it over the microphone. Actually, I can make it. Actually, just put that right there for you. All right. So, I
mean, I got the hat.
Oh yeah, I need wearing a hat.
We're here.
Right. So
you see, I took the sponsor's hat off. Yeah. Just so you know, I took the sponsor's hat off to put yours on for this.
Thank you. So I appreciate it. So we're looking at I get a deck, and it's called 212 FC, and it's a guy that owned a summer league team here called the New York Dutch Lions, and he's in the Netherlands, and he's got a partner who's like a soccer influencer, and I looked through the deck, and I love Danny. So Danny, you know, I've told you this. I look through the deck and I go I say to Andrew, who I just started a fund with and I was the biggest LP in. I might still be to this day. Maybe I'm not anymore because it's taken off a little bit. And I'm like, just get me on the phone with this guy. So we get on a Zoom. You know, he's in the Netherlands. It's late night there because it's afternoon here. And we're going through and I realize that Danny is smart. He's ambitious. He understands soccer. He understands, and he's talked to the USL and he's talked to Mount Vernon and he's done some groundwork. But the understanding of Westchester and the connectivity there is just
zero.
Well, it's just like anything else. And he would love to move back here. And so I go, you know what? Here we get back on his. I go, I want to just marinate on everything you've said, and I don't know a lot. I want to do a little research. I want to be better educated because we just got on the phone quick. He was like, okay, let's get on it. We were like the 4th person he had sent the deck to, and he luckily hit like the Plinko, the pachinko engine landed on the right number. And so we got back on and I'd done some research to USL between us and I'm like, wow, the USL's kind of blown up from the last time. The Tampa Bay Rowdies, I thought they were, from what I understand, they were an NAS. I was like, oh, the NASL, I knew the whole Cosmos thing. Everyone knows the whole Queens. As a Queens kid, I know all about what's gone on there with the land, and so I knew that. So
it's the model, right? Like it's the model that
the model of entrepreneurship, and you don't need billions. And so I'm like, okay, you know, I've had some modest success. I can probably, you know, put a dent in what's needed. And we're in Westchester, and I've done pretty good by my investors, and I've, you know, always operated in kind of like a way where I can engage people and get people. And so it was like, look, you would be a great partner. I want you, you know, let's do this. I'll step in. Because the other thing is everyone in USL, when they start with an idea, they need that majority owner who like has the net worth and can put up the initial resources to get it going. And in my opinion, it was like the World Cup's coming in 2026. So if we're going to do this, like now is the time. I don't want people like, should I buy a World Cup ticket or this new soccer team that's coming to Westchester? I wanted to have like a year of real consumer engagement. I really wanted to like, even if it was a struggle, I thought the struggle a year later would be much harder and it would be more expensive. The USL, you know, like every year the
your
franchise
customer
fees go up.
Acquisition costs would be worse.
And also just the franchise fee would go up. Like the USL is becoming more of a scarce asset.
Yeah.
You can't just put these everywhere. They don't fit in a lot of places. And also you can't, how many teams can be in the US soccer pyramid at the top 3 levels?
And be in the New York market.
Yeah, I wasn't scared about someone coming to Westchester. This would be
but you captured it out, and now you're in you're always going to be in the New York market.
Right. I think that's the challenge. Is look, it's hard. I'm not going to lie. I have been stretched intellectually in a way to learn fast in every which way because you want to build. You have to build it. The wings are being put on the plane while it's taking off, and to do it in the time we've done it is unheard of in a market that you may have heard is kind of tough. A lot of skepticism. Yeah. You know, like there's a guy on Reddit who's from Westchester who every time we do something, he kind of like starts out with like, I'm skeptical, but recently there was this article by John Morrissey in USL Tactics. He's one of the good journalists in the area. And he really dove into our vision and the fact that we're starting with an academy, with kids. Northwell as
I read
partner.
The article. It's
good.
He
did.
It's a good article.
He really lays out the vision, and I felt like it was very true to what we believe in as a team. And like I might be the face of it, but there's a lot of people that believe. There's 50 or 60 people right now that believe exactly what I believe in terms of if we hit our market correctly and continue to do this with this like community connectivity, it's going to be successful.
Yeah.
And it's not about winning the World Cup. It's about you just win the consumer loyalty, the fan loyalty, because they have not fallen. For some reason, Westchester has not fallen in love with NYCFC or the Red Bull. They just haven't. It's difficult to get there. It just hasn't. And this is 10 minutes from almost half of Westchester. And so you have 1 million people living within 20 minutes of the stadium.
And I think even in the city, there are certainly pockets of fans for those folks, but it is not New York City. Like, you don't go New York City Red Bulls. Like, it just doesn't.
I lived in Hoboken when they started. It was the Metro Stars.
Yeah. It's not an automatic connectivity. And I think the opportunity to capture a fan base, not just in your local, like, you got to capture that first, but you can build a national brand in soccer. There is no Dallas Cowboys in soccer. I don't care what they say.
That's big dreams, but I want to win one person, like, I delivered shirts. Someone ordered tickets and they happened to be in Rye about 5 minutes from our.
Yeah, so you show up and deliver yourself.
I showed up and his wife answered the door and his kids were in their pajamas, like, watching TV. And she's like, he's not home. He's going to be gutted. She's like, he's going to be absolutely gutted that he wasn't here. And I'm like, and I'm giving you some extra stuff. Like, he ordered a hat and ticket or whatever it was. And he reached out to me on LinkedIn. I'm not giving my hat back. No, you haven't. Yeah, so he reached out to me on LinkedIn and he was like, I'm so sorry to miss you, but let's connect. And those are the kind of things, like, for me, that's the reward now. We haven't played a game yet. So when the players first join, like, you have these stages. Like, the first 9 months was just work. It was just work and regulatory and this and working with Mount Vernon. And the regulatory side with towns is something I know. And that's why, like, one day, and I think it's going to happen much quicker than people think, is thinking bigger on stadium I think that's a part that people don't even imagine. They're like, okay, it's nice. You're putting together a youth soccer team. No, why is it called Westchester Soccer Club if it's a professional team? And it's like, well, Nashville SC or, first of all, it's called soccer in America. So that's one thing. The second thing is, in the Westchester market, the New York market is sophisticated, second to none. And if you show up with an inauthentic brand, so I didn't want to have, like, this designed.
Yep.
So the Infinity W is kind of like, it was a start. If 2 years from now, someone, I'm sure creative people will ping me with all kinds of things. But if we rebrand a little bit, okay. But I don't think that's going to happen because I think people have actually said the W, a lot of people that I spoke to, there was some skepticism, like, this guy, the W, it's boring. And then people realize, like, it's blue. For all New York teams have a royal blue because of the Dutch connection. And Westchester's nickname was the Golden Apple. So, like, the 914 apple that we're going to have on our uniform and stuff, like, that speaks to the local community. But when you do that, it doesn't exclude anyone.
Yeah.
The Tappan Zee Bridge is some of our iconography.
And you're right. It doesn't exclude even Stanford and Lower Fairfield.
Stanford and Lower Fairfield and Northern New Jersey.
We're going to do anything because they're incapable
We're 2 minutes
movement.
from Co-op City in the Bronx.
Right.
When you stand in our press box at the stadium, you're looking into the Bronx.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that element was why I wanted something simpler that people could make their own. And also we had, like, weeks to figure out something because the USL is like, you have to register your trademark. So you have, like, a 9-week period. And I'm lucky to have some great creatives around me and some good merch people. And, in New York and Westchester in particular, you're one call away from, if you've done good by people and people like you and generally you've been a good community steward, you're one call from a person who is an expert in almost anything, media or otherwise. And I think using that community, I was one call from Sarah Whalen-Hess, who I'm one call from Simon Baines. The coach of Rye High School is the one who connected me.
That's why we're working in Greenwich. Like, people are like, why are you building this in Greenwich? And it's like, well, we're into Westchester, into Lower Fairfield,
right,
and even into the city. It's
all connected.
Even into LA, like, it's like we're connected through everything.
Oh, sure. I mean, one of the people that's working with us was a former executive, a sports executive, moved back here to do something big, but was in sports in LA forever.
That's it. That's exactly what that Westchester, Greenwich, Lower Fairfield County,
and that's why using the bridge. And if you saw our brand
when you
reveal,
get to mothers that aren't working, it's like, there are mothers that aren't working that were executives in Fortune 500 companies,
and one of them works
for
us now. She's going back to school. She was like, okay, I've gotten my kids, I've done everything I can for them. They're now 18, and I want to. I used to be an executive at a marketing firm or a ad firm and I think the other thing is using now, like, you get off the ground, you're like, okay, the W looks nice. And I'm driving over the Tappan Zee Bridge one day and I'm like, that's the landmark we need. Because like Westchester, what is it known as? It's known as a beautiful place. But we're all rivals. Each town is like a rival of the others. And the whole idea was always to be like, this could be the first thing that's like Westchester's name is on something.
So I think you should have put, instead of the Tappan Zee, it should have been the Cuomo Junction and just the traffic that creates. You could like everybody in your target market.
I mean, look, it is the Mario Cuomo Bridge, but I don't think there's a person that I've run into. I don't think there's a person. And by the way, Tappan was a Dutch, and so
hence the Z.
So we get lucky and we pick something, and I'm driving over the bridge and I see the W's because that's the new design. The old design was not like that, and it's beautiful the way they've done it in brick. And so one of our goalie Dane actually on his Instagram page has a beautiful picture probably from Piermont or maybe Nyack, but of like the sunset over the bridge, or maybe it's from Tarrytown.
No, it's got to be it's got to be Tarrytown.
If you get the sunset in it. Right. So he took it the other day, and it's like, even the players understand that there's a unique thing happening here. Yeah. And I think with all of that, it's like, we do have an icon, and we have the Kensigo Dam, which is cool, and that's going to be on our goalie jersey. We haven't released that design yet. We haven't released our blue kit yet, which has the Infinity W embedded in it. That's all I'm going to say for now until we reveal it next week. So we released a white kit and people complained. We do have the Tappan Zee Bridge embedded in it.
Perfect.
But the Infinity W, which is more of our icon, is embedded in the blue kit. So for those of you who have complained about the white kit being boring, look, we didn't do the opacity of the bridge the right way. It'll be darker on the final jersey. It'll look nice, and it's not going to be boring, and the blue kit's going to be fire. So,
well, thanks for coming by, and look forward to coming and talking about your DAC and opportunities with Westchester. We're really excited about it, again, your one step removed theory is exactly what's so exciting, and the people that you're one step connected through are also of such quality that you can have some confidence when you go into the conversations.
Definitely,
right? So very excited, and thank you for stopping by, Mitch.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me and let me tell the stories.
Yeah, dude, you can come back and tell stories. Like, you don't even have to come back. Like, I'll just come by and buy you coffee and get stories. Like,
we just want to do an Instagram feed? I don't know.
Nah, I mean, it's just
between us and our 5,000 best friends.
Yeah, it's just great. It's just so you've accomplished what my mother says is entirely impossible, which is shutting me up. So
wow, I hear that too.